All right, Steeler fans, it's time for a Monday morning conversation. And of course, after minicamp wraps up, you got to bring in one of the insiders, and that's my boy, Chris Carter. He's one of the insiders now. What's up, Chris? How are you?
I'm all right, Jeff. How you doing, sir?
I'm fine. I'm actually feeling good. I like it. I'm actually okay with the way the Steelers are trending. I got a little hope, a little bit of life injected into me after the signing of Aaron Rodgers. Were you the same? I was kind of like, I don't know what the season's going to be like. And then when they signed Aaron Rodgers, you're kind of like, okay, I can maybe see something here. What are your thoughts?
So it was less about when they signed Aaron Rodgers. It was like basically after the March meeting. I personally felt like it was probably going to happen and that there was probably a date. And then like I heard some things that were just basically like, oh yeah, like this is like in the work. This isn't just in the works. It's like there's an agreement. And so the Steelers and Aaron Rodgers, that was going to happen. Now my thing is, I after when you saw the quick decline of Ben Roethlisberger and how that went, and now you got a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers, you just don't know when that's going to kick in, right? Like when the age, like if his elbow goes, or if his knees go, or something happens in that respect, you just don't know. And so like that's tough to see, and it's also tough to see because he won 5 games with the Jets last year. His last season with the Packers, they went 8-9. And you're kind of like, man, like which version of Aaron Rodgers will you get? But when you see him in person, it is kind of just wild just to kind of behold like a lot of the Steelers and even the reporters are like, we've covered this game, we've covered a lot of people, we've seen a lot, like we've covered Ben Roethlisberger, but like when Aaron Rodgers says, you're like, holy crap, that is just Aaron Rodgers sitting right, like warming up in front of you. And so I think there is a sense of optimism in that. If the Steelers are able to be the organization that they normally have been, and this is a year where there's a lot of growth on the team around Aaron Rodgers, this could work out for the Steelers in that they could take a step up for where they have been, where they've been barely making it into the playoffs and then losing in the first round. This could be a year where maybe they don't win the division, but they're a little more solid in making the playoffs, and they're the 5 seed, which is what they were close to being last year. And if you're the 5 seed, you play most likely like the AFC South division winner, and that's a playoff game that you could probably win, and then you could build some momentum, and that could be something there. But I think there is a sense that with Aaron Rodgers that can be, and I got to be honest, like before this all happened, like I was not on that train of like I thought Aaron Rodgers could do something like that. I think that I still think that he can be a guy that gets them to a max of 11 wins and maybe do that. But I think there's some people that believe that he might be the guy that gets them back to the AFC Championship, back to the Super Bowl. And I won't go that far just yet, but I do think what he does is over Mason Rudolph, and this is no like dissing Mason Rudolph, but I think that he makes less mistakes. He makes smarter reads. He sort of shortcuts a lot of the things in the offense that have been held up by bad to mediocre play for the past 5-6 years.
Yeah, it's fair. Now, you saw him in person. You mentioned, man, it's like Aaron Rodgers is right there warming up. You see videos and you see him moving. He looks like he's moving well. Obviously, he's coming off of a restful offseason and all that stuff. But the dude can still sling it, right? Is it different in person than it is on video? Because it looks like he can still spin it.
I mean, he certainly has that release right now. Just to be clear, he didn't do any team drills. So, like, we didn't see him throw to anyone like in a live play. But, like, he certainly does, like, spin it. Like, when he throws it, he has that quick release that the ball snaps out of his hand and gets where he wants it to go. And that's pretty cool. And I'll also say, like, he's moving around all right. Like if you've seen the videos that we posted from minicamp, like when he's doing the drills and he's doing a rollout, like he looks like a normal guy doing that. He doesn't look like, when you think of like an old man trying to move around the way that, you think he would at his age. So he's been taking care of himself. That much was evident by his appearance at minicamp. It'll be interesting in training camp to see like, okay, when he does his first 7 shots, how does that go? Like, is the Steelers defense just wowed by like, wow, this guy's like seeing so many things, and we have to now account for so many things that we haven't had to for the past several years when we do these drills because of the quarterbacks that have been under center for the Steelers.
I think it's what I should do is I need to go back to 2024 Jets workouts because he wasn't at minicamp. We all know that story, but I think he was at OTAs and just seeing how he moved because people don't realize like when you rupture your Achilles tendon, that is a 9-month to a 1-year recovery.
Yeah.
And so all of last off season, getting ready for 2024 was spent rehabilitating. and getting his foot and ankle and that whole lower leg ready. Well, this year he doesn't have that. I think that's a big important note here about Aaron Rodgers, but I don't want to spend too much time on Aaron Rodgers because now everyone's talking obviously about TJ Watt's absence. And I want to ask you what you're hearing about that. Obviously, Mike Tomlin on Thursday said when both sides want to get a deal done, typically it does get done. Just from what you're hearing or what you're feeling, what do you think is going to happen with that storyline? Is it going to be going into training camp, or do you think it'll happen before that?
I think it'll be something that happens during training camp. I think the Steelers, the way they operate, you need to report to them. Like, you need to show up to camp. If TJ Watt shows up to camp, there will be a deal done in training camp or shortly after that. Shortly thereafter, when they get out of training camp and they're at the facility doing their final weeks preps leading up to week one. But I keep telling people, like, there are certain signs that I look for when I'm figuring out, like, okay, is a contract negotiation going to go south, or is it going to be fine? And contact with the team and understanding between both parties is a big part of it. And when you talk to Mike Tomlin on Thursday, he's like, "Yeah, I'm in constant contact with TJ." I talked to Denzel Martin, the outside linebackers coach, his position coach for the past several years. He's like, "Oh yeah, I've been talking to TJ like every day." I talked to Alex Highsmith leading up to this week. "Oh yeah, I've been in constant contact with TJ." So, like, if TJ Watt was really at odds with the Steelers and was just like, "Man, I don't like these guys," if he's feeling like Trey Hendrickson, if he's feeling like Shamar Stewart, you'd see him making more public statements. You'd see him being out there, accosting the team, talking about, "Oh, the Rooney's this or that," or you'd see him kind of like shunning them, and they'd have questions, and they'd be like, "Well, maybe there is something there." None of that is there in this, and I think TJ Watt is by the start of the season, he'll have a new contract. It'll be like $41-ish million a year on average. It'll have, it'll be a 3-year deal. That'll probably give the Steelers some escapability in the third year to decide, okay, how, do we want to keep extending him, or how do we want to handle that? But yeah, I totally see TJ Watt being a lifelong Steeler in this process, and that not being an issue.
Well, let me ask you this though, because on our podcast network, our hosts are kind of split here. Were you surprised that he didn't show up? Because I think optics are huge.
I was.
And TJ's never skipped anything. Even when he went through the contract stuff last year, he was there. He didn't do it much. He didn't do anything outside of individual work, but he was there. I got to be honest. I was shocked that he didn't show up to mandatory minicamp. You were too?
Yeah, I was very, very shocked. I thought that he was going to show up, but my colleague at the Post-Gazette, Ray Fittipaldo, put a very good perspective on it. He was like, he noticed, like, this year there's a lot more holdouts across the league, where hold-ins a couple years ago, for the past several years, had been the thing. That's what TJ Watt did. That's what Deontay Johnson did. That's what Minkah Fitzpatrick did. That's what Alex Highsmith did. So, like, the Steelers themselves had that trend, but that was a trend that the whole NFL was using. Like agents were just like, "Hey, hold in, it'll work." But what players have now realized, they're like, teams want us to hold in, because when we're holding in, we're there. We're just not doing the team drills, and that's not like really putting that much pressure on them. So we need to put more pressure on them at the negotiation table and not show up. And our absence is going to speak louder than us being there tacitly, So yeah. I think that's kind of what happened here, is that TJ Watt is just simply employing the new strategy that a lot of agents are using. Look at what's happening with Terry McLaurin. I know a lot of Steelers fans are like, "Terry McLaurin, he could be available." No, trust me, the Commanders are going to re-sign that man. They have the money. He's a heck of a playmaker. They need that guy for Jaden Daniels. He's not going nowhere. This is just his tactic to try to get more money out of them. And as players should. It's a business. That's the whole thing about this, is that you're looking to maximize your income for this job that you busted your whole life for. So let's be real. I think TJ Watt, this is part of that tactic. It did surprise me, but when I looked around the league and I saw, like, how a lot of people were handling their contract negotiations, it's like, okay, this kind of makes sense. Where it'll be different is if TJ Watt doesn't show up for training camp, and we get into, like, the week before the first preseason game, and everyone's wondering where he is. That is when it could be like, okay, what's going on here? But Cam Hayward last year didn't show up for OTAs, and then eventually showed up for like the last day of OTAs, and then was there for mini camp, and then eventually got his deal done. I think something like that could happen with training camp, where he'll show up, he'll do things on the side. Omar Khan will get a deal done, and bing, bang, boom, all of a sudden TJ Watt is ready to go and looks really good at the start of the season.
That's what I expect to happen as well. But I want to talk about the new players to the Steelers. Now, we're going to do this in two different parts. We're going to talk about players that were acquired in some way, shape, or form, but they're veterans. They've been in the league. And then we'll talk about the rookies separately. So, out of all the players that were acquired, whether it's via trade, via free agency, they were released, whatever, was there a player or two that stuck out to you during these offseason workouts that you're like, man, I didn't expect that? Or, man, this guy is, whatever the case is, stood out to you? Were there any players that would fit that description?
So I'll talk about something that I wrote about for the Post-Gazette for Saturday, and it was DK Metcalf's demeanor and how he handled things, and a stark difference I saw from George Pickens, who would have been their number one wide receiver had they not made this move, and they kept him. DK Metcalf went up against Joey Porter Jr. on the first day of minicamp, and DK Metcalf hadn't been at OTAs, but when he did, it was like one of the 7 shots reps, and it's just a goal line fade. Yep. He's going to the end zone. Joey Porter Jr. gets flagged for holding, and he's like upset at the ref. And he's like, he was pushing me. What am I supposed to do in that situation? He's pushing me. And so instead of like mocking him like George Pickens had, would do whenever he beat Joey Porter Jr. In the past 2 years, DK Metcalf went up and was like, hey man, like I intentionally like ran up on you to look like I was going to block, set you up, and then kind of drew that out of you. That was the goal of that. And he's like, I didn't do that to you when we faced off when the Steelers played the Seahawks 2 years ago. And so Joey Porter Jr. was kind of like, oh, got it. Cool. He's doing things to test me in this part of my game that I need to improve. They shook hands and they moved on with it. And I think that's a welcomed like leadership moment where it's like, hey, he's not saying everyone get behind me, everyone follow me. He's just like, hey, I'm going to do my professional things here in practice, and I'm hoping and it'll help me get better, but it also help my teammates get better, even if they're not my teammates on offense. So I think that's something that was very noticeable when you talk to him. Also, DK Metcalf is like the most respectable guy. Like he says, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Like he's always treating people with respect. And I think that's something that'll be really interesting to see. A tonal shift is in the guy who might be the best player on the offense now when you think about like talent-wise what he brings to the table. And that might change soon because these offensive linemen are going to start turning up. But I thought that was really interesting to see how he brought that to the table. It was tough to really see much with Darius Slay, and I think he looked fine in everything, but his best moments are going to come when they start like playing as a whole secondary and how his savviness plays into things. I had to think about other additions as far as like free agents and guys, but DK Metcalf I think spoke the loudest there as far as those guys.
Well, and what you're talking about is it's kind of, for me, hearing this is a breath of fresh air. I think if you go all the way back, and I remember seeing this, this is not in firsthand accounts, but I remember seeing an Antonio Brown at the pinnacle of his game, destroying a young man's confidence in Artie Burns. And it was intentional. Like somehow Artie Burns was trying to take his job. Like that's what it felt like. It's like, you guys are on the same team, man. And then that continued a little bit with George Pickens and the jawing that you would see. I get that at training camp, it's going to get heated. You're going to want to compete against one another. I expect that to happen. But hearing that from DK Metcalf, that's kind of like an old school thing where, hey, we're going to compete. We're going to do our best, but I want to make you better because we're on the same team, and I'm not trying to show you up. I'm not trying to make a fool out of you. And I can never forget for the life of me those videos of Antonio Brown absolutely just embarrassing of rookie Artie Burns, and thinking this young man's confidence has to be completely shattered. So that's a great story. Hey, is DK as big as we think?
Yes. Yeah, he is a big, fast man. Like when you see him in person, you're like, oh yeah, that's the. It was funny because like through OTAs, we were like, can you always when you're at OTAs, you're trying to see every day. You're trying to see, okay, who's out there today? Like you're watching, you're looking at stretch lines, and you're like, all right, who's here? And it was just like, oh, no really tall person in the receiver room. DK's not here. First day of minicamp. There's the Eiffel Tower. There, it's just like there's the Cathedral of Learning. Like the tall guys there. So it's very noticeable his size. But the cool thing is, I think, is when you watch him like run his routes, it doesn't make him look stiff. And I think that's something that's going to be welcomed in the Steelers offense.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the rookies now. Same question. Sure. What rookies stood out? I've got a couple in mind that I'm curious if you're going to bring up, and I'll let you have the floor here. What rookies stood out, positive, negative, otherwise?
So first day of rookie camp, Carl Dunbar has the defensive lineman hitting the sled, and he's telling them to do certain things. And it's Derek Harmon and Y.A. Black, and he just says, "Hit!" And they hit the sled, and they move it, and it kind of catches him off guard with how much they exploded off it. And he like almost falls off the sled, and he's like, "Oh, so y'all strong, okay?" And so like that kind of caught him off guard. And then I think Derek Harmon, the fact that Carl Dunbar came out and told us on Tuesday, "Oh, he's our starting left defensive end."
That was surprising to me too, man.
Jeff, like you and I have seen, why aren't they starting this guy? Why aren't they? There's not even a question of that. The only person I could think that got that privilege recently was Najee Harris because they didn't have a running back, right? And so, and they like for sure they got rid of Larry Ogunjobi. Keanu Benton is there probably going to be their nose still, and but like. I think it's interesting that they're not like, oh, Daniel Okwale, we'll give you the first team reps so that Derek. No, they're not getting Derek Harmon up to speed. They're saying, yeah, get in there, young man, and do what you do. I think that's a very good sign for him. I talked to Caleb Johnson a few times throughout the practices, and one thing he said, I think this was the Thursday, the last day of OTAs before minicamp. I asked him, I saw, like, you're a physical guy. You are fast, but you're a guy who makes when you get to use your size, that's when you're at your best. And I was like, how do you work on that while you're not able to hit people? And he says, well, one thing I'm doing is every time I run the ball, I told the defense to do everything they could to punch it out. And I after I make the initial run of like what hole I'm supposed to cut to, I then run to every defender I can and say punch the ball out, and everyone tries their best. And I saw it in person again in minicamp practices this past week, where one time he hit the hole, he ran the run, and then eventually he ran out of bounds. And then on the sideline, I saw like 5 dudes just like try to club it. Guys that weren't even in the play. They were just everyone's trying to club it through 2 rookie camp practices, 6 OTAs practices, and 3 minicamp practices. So you're talking about 11 total practices that we've had access to. He has not let a ball hit the ground when it comes to carrying. So I thought that was pretty cool on his part to see that there.
Caleb Johnson, is this turning into like the program-esque where he's carrying the football around the school?
It might. Well, but it might not need to, right? Because that was because he was fumbling. So I think this is just him showing like, hey, that ball security that Najee Harris really provided this team for 4 years. That was one of my biggest worries about like if the Steelers were to get to rely. And Jaylen Warren's still probably going to be RB1 for this team. When it starts the season, maybe not by the end of the season, but ball security has been a big asset that Najee Harris brought, and I was wondering, like, would that drop off with whoever they brought in? It just in the first 11 practices or so, this doesn't look like it was much of a concern for Caleb Johnson.
Caleb Johnson, he's a big running back. Like he's his size, like he's taller, but he's not built like Najee Harris, right? He's a lot leaner. Am I seeing that the same way you did in person?
Oh yeah, he's definitely leaner. Like he's like he just, I think he just comes off more like, okay, you see the athleticism a bit easier in person, whereas like when you're watching Iowa's film, the guys look different in pads, right? And they're different in games, but I think you can see like he is quick, he is explosive, he has that extra gear in him, and that's what's going to be interesting to see, like how does that translate to the NFL as far as his vision, because I think that the biggest thing that he'll bring, and again this comes back to when the pads are on, is I love his vision and the way he stacks defenders. He's like, okay, I can set this block up, that block up. His patience is a big part of what works. And you can't see patience when there's no pads on and the linemen are kind of just going through reps, right? So how that develops when we get to like the second week of training camp, because it's always like the first 4 or 5 practices are without pads. But when we get to that second week and the pads are on and they start like handing him the ball off and letting him go against the Steelers defense, that's when I'll be intrigued to see like how does he look when that happens.
Another topic that I found very intriguing, and a lot of people might have just kind of brushed it under the rug, it happens to deal with 2 Georgia Bulldogs and the number on scale. What was your take on Broderick Jones and Darnell Washington both saying they dropped weight? I can't help but think that the gaining of weight might have been a systemic, we want you to gain some weight. We want Darnell Washington. We want you to be an extra tackle out there. So let's put on 10 or 15 pounds. Broderick Jones, we want you to be a little bit more bruising and they drop that weight back. What was your take on that? I mean, do you think that this for their benefit? What do you see there? Because this seems like, okay, I think it's a good thing personally. I think it's a good thing that they're leaning down, they're getting more athletic. But what's your take on it from seeing them in person, maybe talking to them? What was your takeaway?
So I'll start with Broderick Jones. I was the person that asked him about the weight change, because when I first walked out into OTAs and he was there, I was like, oh, he slimmed down, that it's just visibly noticeable. And then it was fun, and so I asked him. He said he took off 20 pounds because he wanted to try coming into the season lighter, and then throughout the season he'd get heavier, and then it would be like he'd be able to play with it a little bit better. But I asked him the last day of minicamp, and I was like, so how did it feel like now that you've had 3 weeks to play with? He's like, honestly, he's like, I kind of want to keep it off. He's like, I like how I feel right now. I feel more fluid. I feel more intense. And I think the gym was just like, this is a lot better of a way to play. Now, how will that play when he starts like hitting guys and having to move people? That's another thing, because if you remember, like Stephon Tuitt, he tried so many different weight changes throughout his career. One year he was heavier, one year he was lighter, and he was trying to do different things. It just takes time to figure out what's best for your body to excel at the position that you're playing. So I think Broderick Jones, and I mean, again, I can't tell how he looks when he's not hitting guys, but I can tell you that when I was watching his drop, I saw a more confident guy, and maybe that part of that's also he's on the left side instead of the right, and the left is where he's more comfortable. But I do think that Broderick Jones is looking fine there. I think that the 20-pound drop in weight by him, I think that was, could end up being beneficial. And I kind of like the idea so far, because his biggest problem is he didn't stop speed rushers. When Broderick Jones got his hands on you, he could be a problem. But the problem was that, and then also I honestly think I taught, and kind of getting this from Pat Meyer, the Steelers offensive line coach, fatigue played a big role in far as when you saw him and Dan Moore running into each other. Those mistakes happen more and more when you're tired, when you're exhausted, when you're just kind of just the attrition of game after game after game and week after week and grind after grind. And then eventually you're just like, you're in a game and you're like, okay, the play calls this, I think it's this. And you're not thinking it straight because you're winded, you're catching your breath, or you're doing this. And so now, it was funny that same day, Thursday, I kind of was just looking around the locker room, all right, who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to talk to? And I see Broderick Jones, and he has his shirt off, and he's kind of just standing there. And it's the weirdest thing, because this man is 300 pounds and 6'6" or 6'7", however tall he is. And it's just, but he looked like he naturally fit into it. And he didn't look like he was carrying, you saw the difference with the excess weight. Cause I've seen him the last 2 years where you've got, okay, he obviously has some gut to him and some stuff, but it looked more like a person's body who's just fine. They're not overweight. They're not anything. And I think that he likes that. And I think that's a good thing. Now for Darnell Washington, I think that for him, it's going to be less about the lost weight and more about, he's about to get used a lot more in the passing game this year. At least that's what he seemed to be expressing. He said that this year, in the installation periods they've done, he's lining up in the bunch. He's lining up here. He's lining up there. It's so many different spots for him. And that's going to allow him to run more routes from different spots and get more chances. And, Aaron Rodgers compared him to Mercedes Lewis, who was, a tight end early in Aaron Rodgers' career. He used a lot in goal line situations. And I think Darnell Washington might end up having the year that I think Steelers fans have been waiting for from him, in that just give him a shot in the red zone, or when the team's running with your number one wide receiver and your number one tight end, and they're worried about the running back and they're worried about your number two wide receiver, and Darnell Washington's just sitting in the flat with a linebacker 5 yards away from him. Get him the ball and let him run through that linebacker for 5, 8, 10 yards and do that more often. And I think this could be a year where you see Darnell Washington be used more in ways like that. And in fact, the very last play of minicamp, so back to the rookie question, Will Howard is leading the 2-minute drill, and he ends practice with a strike that was just high up for Darnell Washington to get it. Darnell just catches it, keeps moving. It was well, that's a touchdown. He was at the 10-yard line. And by the time he kind of turned, there was a defender in the way, but they were yeah, you wouldn't have stopped him. He was going to get into the end zone. It was a good throw from Will Howard, but also a good play by Darnell Washington. I think he's going to be used in an expanded role. And I think Broderick Jones has a chance to have to start the the run of play that's going to justify, hey, this is why they traded up to get that guy in the first round.
I got to ask Will Howard, how's he looked? You said that was a good throw that he had to Darnell Washington. He publicly said that he struggled at the first outset of OTAs and minicamp. Did you see him settle in a little bit?
A little bit. I think the thing is that, and it's so funny, like my listeners on Locked On Steelers is like, man, Chris hates Will Howard. Like, no, I want the young man to be a 6th round pick. It's like when you think you don't want to make your kid like the prodigy when they're like 5, right? You want them to have their childhood. I want this guy to come in and just practice. No pressure to be the man. No one's put Will Howard in the game. Just let him be the backup. Let him be the backup that learns. So from now he can learn from Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph, develop and grow his skills. And I think that he can be fine if he does that. But I think the people that are like, he's Big Ben 2.0, he's Josh Allen, he's this, he's that. I'm like, you're rushing to put labels on this guy that, trust me, he don't want. He wants to
6th round pick, people. He's a 6th round draft pick.
Exactly. And again, like if it wasn't for the playoff run that he went on in his last year, might have been a 7th round pick, might have gone undrafted. Like when I talk to guys of like that study NFL talent, like I thought Will Howard could have been a 4th round pick just because of the frenzy of quarterback play and the big plays that he made in the playoffs. And then when he went in the 6th round, like, man, like, okay, cool. But there's a lot of people out there like, man, like before that playoff run, I didn't even have him being drafted because he was not playing well. He was Ohio State was carrying him. He had the 2 best receiver, like the best 1-2 punch at wide receiver in college football, the best 1-2 punch at running back in college football. Oh, and by the way, some really good offensive linemen. So like, how much was he doing really? But I think that his run in the playoffs and the big plays that he made in the tough moments, that impressed enough people, including the Steelers, say, hey, let's give him a chance. But in minicamp, I do think he settled down a little bit. And I think that's a good sign, but not in the way that it's like, will he take some snaps away from Aaron Rodgers? Will he push Mason Rudolph for the number 2 quarterback? No, he's not. That's not this year. Be excited for the later part of preseason games to see how does he do there. If he does well there, then we can start talking about like, okay, maybe he could be the future backup guy that challenges for a starting spot if the Steelers get it wrong at quarterback next year when they draft one and those 2 guys are duking it out for whatever reason. But right now, let Will Howard be the 6th round rookie backup guy.
I love it. Let's finish this up with your personal opinion. I want to hear a couple. What are some storylines that you're looking forward to heading into training camp? We have this lull where it's like 4 weeks where there's nothing, but obviously TJ Watt aside, Aaron Rodgers' health aside, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to seeing when the team reports to St. Vincent College in Latrobe in July?
So it's something that I'll be writing about soon for the Post-Gazette because I asked multiple guys about this. Everyone's going to be looking at Aaron Rodgers. Everyone's going to be looking at DK Metcalf. Those are the stars. Those are the big names. Everyone's like, okay, they're going to drive. They're not going to be what wins for the Steelers this year. They'll be a good part of it. They'll be an important part of it. They won't be the vital part of it. The vital part of it this year will be not just one position group, but the 2023 draft class, in my opinion. I really think, and I talked to Broderick Jones and Joey Porter Jr. about this towards the end of minicamp. There's a camaraderie amongst that group. Broderick Jones told me how like they still go to dinner together. Like, you think that like, oh, they've all gone to their position groups and gotten their friends. They're still all pretty close. And when you think about it, that entire class is still very relevant to where the Steelers are, both as starters and as depth players. Right. You got Broderick Jones moving to left tackle. You need Broderick Jones to be the guy. I think he looks good. If he turns into a really good tackle this year, that does so much for the offensive line, and they're starting to propel themselves forward from being a below average unit to an average unit to maybe being an above average unit this year. Then you go to Joey Porter Jr. If he can take away those penalties that DK Metcalf was showing him, hey, this is what you're doing. You need to improve upon it. And Jared Alexander, the DB's coach, is helping. That's going to do so much for the Steelers to give them a CB1 who could be a real problem for team star receivers. Then you flip to Keanu Benton. If he learns how to finish better when it comes to when it comes to when you get in the backfield, he gets pressure. He just needs to get more sacks, and he also needs to do better against double teams. If he takes that step forward, then they're really good there. But then Darnell Washington, we talked about his expanded use. That's another way that could be. Nick Herbig was basically getting all the reps that TJ Watt would have gotten all practice long with his thing. Corey Trice is the guy that's going to come off the bench if Slay or Porter go down. That 2023 class has so much potential and I think is on the right trajectory with all of those picks. that could be the story of the season. Is if that class starts to come around, then all of a sudden the first Omar Khan draft class starts to look like it's coming into form and it's starting to make up the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then I think people are going to be like, oh, wait a second. That window that everyone thought was permanently closed until the Steelers just completely tear things down, now it's actually opening up again. I think that's going to be the story of the Steelers 2025 season. If that group turns into the new up-and-coming lieutenants of the Steelers that are not the captains, Cam Hayward, Baker Fitzpatrick, TJ Watt, those will still be the guys. But if they become like the guys that you're looking at, like the way that you looked at Marquise Pouncey when he was a young player, or TJ Watt when he was a young player, or Cam Hayward when he was a younger player, if you start to see those guys develop into a thing like that, that could start to develop the new core. And then as Zach Frazier gets better, as Troy Faltanu gets to actually play from being healthy, then you start to see a lot of things filling out, and you might see a new rise in the Pittsburgh Steelers.
There's been a lot of turnover. The Kevin Colbert final draft classes have just been, we're getting rid of you. We're getting rid of you. Yeah, see, you want the Steelers to build that nucleus, and you want them to have players that you're like, we want to bring them back for a second contract. And I feel like recent history with the Steelers is the opposite. It's, okay, you're a free agent. Good luck. We're going to replace you with someone either that's in free agency or through the draft. It's time that they rebuild that nucleus. I agree with you. 2023 draft class is going to be huge. But Chris, I appreciate your time. I want to give you an opportunity to plug what you're doing for the Post-Gazette as well as the Locked On Steelers podcast and any social medias you want to plug as well.
Absolutely. You can find me on any social media handle, whether it's TikTok, Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, same handle everywhere, at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com, including the minicamp rivalry that was DK Metcalf and Joey Porter Jr., my insights on it and what I saw there from talking to both of those guys. And you can also check me on the North Shore Drive podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But as always, you can also check me out every day, Monday through Friday, on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Same way you get all your podcasts like this one on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it, because you're going to enjoy all the stuff that Jeff does. And subscribe to this channel because Jeff does a great job. Jeff and I go way back, as I say all the time. I remember doing it in my third floor apartment, just like yelling into the microphone with you after some crazy Steelers games. And it's always amazing to see how far we both come, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Super proud of you, Chris, man. Thanks for the time. And like I said, he's the only podcast I tell you to listen to that's on the Steel Curtain Network. So go check him out, Chris. Thanks, man. Enjoy it. Have a good summer.
Thank you.